Joe, thank you very much for those very kind words. And I had notes up here, but the people close to the audience can see I had them in my coat pocket. And I may get dehydrated. I've been sweating up here for the last 15 or 20 minutes, and they've kind of running. The ink has kind of run a little bit, but I'll try to make do here. It was only a year ago that I was really out in the audience right here and watched Joe Green. Yeah. Joe Green, who was a cornerstone of our football team, and I saw him accept the greatest individual honor a football player can ever receive, to be inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I watched Joe mention almost all the players on our Super Bowl years name for name. And I'll tell you, I sat in that audience and I was very proud to be among the names that he mentioned. And I guess to go over my life, my football career, in both college and high school and pro and whatever, there's one thing that's been consistent about me, I think, that I've always been associated or been around winners. And you heard Joe talk a little about Steve Smear. It started back then. If it hadn't been for Steve Smear, I really would not be here right now. He went on a limb for me before I was an all-pro player or before I became an All-American at Penn State. He went to bat for me to Joe Paterno, and I'll tell you what, I'm indebted to him for doing that and having a confidence in me. I also was associated with winners when I went to Penn State. I mean, Joe Paterno taught me a lot more than just to be confident in myself and to play better football. He taught me there was a lot more important than football, and that football should not be the most important thing in your life. And I've grown to know Joe better now since I left Penn State and been in the pros and since I retired. And all of you out there, I think, you know, you all respect Joe Paterno, the coach, but the better I know him, the more I respect Joe Paterno, the man. A couple of points that I just want to make here. Again, I'm keeping consistent. I will be rather brief, I guess, but even when I went to Pittsburgh, when I was drafted in the second round, and Pittsburgh didn't have a very good football team the prior 2 years. They were 1-9, 1-13, and 5-9. Really not exactly winners, and they weren't going anywhere. But all of a sudden, again, I was surrounded by more winners. All of a sudden, the emergence of Bradshaw and Franco. You know, Hollywood, Baggs, Swanee, Stallworth, Banaszak, Webster, Blunt, and Rocky, and a whole lot more. And you know, we won a lot of Super Bowls then, four Super Bowls in 6 years, and we had great players. But one point I'd like to make, nowhere would we have been able to win those games or win those championships if it wasn't for one man, and that's pure and simple Chuck Noll. Just going over more of my situation with Pittsburgh, I guess one highlight I'm going to look back on and a memory I'll have forever is watching Mr. Rooney in Super Bowl IX accept the Lombardi Trophy as the best football team in the world, and also watching Dan Rooney and the rest of the organization realize after 42 years we've become champions and we've become winners, and that probably is the biggest highlight in the memory I'll always have. But the thing I'll remember most is the players. There's a couple individual players I would like to mention. I go back a long way with one of these guys. Guy, the 11th round draft pick out of Western Illinois, who came into Pittsburgh in 1971, and no one ever thought he'd make the football team. He's been a great friend of mine, and it's a friendship I cherish to this day. And he just set the tone for free safety, made himself a great football player, an all-pro, and the leader of our secondary. That's number 23, Mike Wagner. A couple other players, and this is kind of ironic in the sense that I don't have a lot of trophies in my house that I display or even in my office, but I do have one picture in my home that I display, and display very proudly. It's a photo of a linebacker corps after a playoff victory against Baltimore, and the numbers are number 34, number 58, and number 59. one thing about number 34, Andy Russell. The person who probably influenced my game and made me the linebacker that I became was Andy Russell. He taught me more about football, more about the mental part of the game. It made me just a great player only because the mental part that he taught me for so many years. Andy was known as the thinking man's linebacker. And then there was number 58. Lambert. Lambert was more known as the drinking man's linebacker. You know, we got a lot of great players, and I had an opportunity to go through the Hall of Fame the last couple of days. A lot of great linebackers here in the Hall of Fame. Willie Lanier, Ray Nitschke, Dick Butkus and company. But the guy that I played with for over 10 years on our football team in Pittsburgh may be the greatest middle linebacker to ever play the game. That man revolutionized the position of middle linebacker, and in 2 years, he'll be right here at this podium. I guess a few other people I'd just like to thank, and they'll be very quick and very brief. You heard Joe mention my mother, who's out here in the audience right now. My father, who's probably looking down on this festivities right now and wondering how I did it. But there's a couple other people out here as well. A friend of mine a friendship I made not through football, but a guy who would call me sometimes when I had a bad game, or a time I would get injured, or our team didn't play well. Good friend of mine, a great basketball player, Mr. Doug Collins. And the last person I want to thank is a person who, just pure and simple, has been the best thing that happened to me in my life, and that's my wife, Joanne. In closing, I'd just like to say that, you know, I don't get too nostalgic that often, but seeing this crowd out here and a lot of old friends from Johnstown, Woodville Heights, and all over the place, you know, it's, I realize that the fans and my Dober Shuka fan club up here on the right, you people were a great part of why we were a championship team for so many years. Fans, the other visiting team hated to come into Pittsburgh and play. They knew that not only we have great players, but probably the greatest fans as well, and it was almost impossible for them to win. And in closing, all I'd like to say is, I hope all of you remember this road to Canton, because all of us will be traveling this road in future years. I guarantee you, it'll be an annual event to help honor some of my teammates who were part of the greatest football team in the history of the NFL. Thank you.